Hey, hello friends, and welcome to Retro Portal Studio. And in today's video we're going to be taking a look at creating this awesome paint app in Flutter. So this is an app with a simple layout. It has a drawing area and a simple panel below in which you can change the color, adjust the stroke, and also clear the panel above. So what you can do here is you can draw anything in the paint area, and if you want to change the color of the pencil that you're using, you can just select the color from this dialog and close, and the color of the pencil is changed. You can also change the width of the pencil or brush by increasing or decreasing this slider, and if I make this full, then you can see that the stroke width is changed. And also, if you have drawn something wrong, you can just click on this button and clear the whole drawing panel. So this is a simple app that we'll be focusing on in this tutorial, and in this tutorial we'll be taking a special look at Custom Painter, which is used to create such apps where you want the user to draw on the screen or something like that. So let's get started. Okay, so right now I'm in a simple Flutter app which is having this My App widget, which contains a material app, and this material app is having a home screen of my home page. So this My Home Page is a stateful widget which contains a scaffold, which further contains a stack as the body and a container. So the reason for having a stack as the body of the scaffold is just to have this background gradient in the scaffold, and this gradient comes from the container, which is the first child of the stack widget. And this container is having a decoration, which is a box decoration, which is further having a gradient of a type a linear gradient, and these colors are giving the gradient that you can see on the screen. So other than the code here, I've added a dependency in the pubspec.yaml file that is this Flutter color picker that is at version 0.3.2. So what this dependency helps us do is it helps us to create such dialogues in which we can just select the color, and you can see that this one was in the demo that I showed you earlier. And you can create any dialog that you want, and we'll be adding this simple code in our application to create the dialogues from this dependency. So this is the simple app that I have right now, and we'll be creating the complete painter from this app here. So let's get started. Okay, so first things first is we have to create a layout in which we can have a paint area above and a simple layout to contain these three elements below. So for that, we'll be adding a simple column after the container. So in this we'll be having a column, and in this we'll be having children property. And for the children property, we'll be adding a simple container to have this drawing area above here. So in this container, you can see that we have a simple shadow here, and for the shadow, we'll be adding the simple decoration to this container. For the decoration, what we can do is we can add decoration. For this, we can add a box decoration. And this box decoration, what I'll be having is a border radius to add some radius to it. So for the border radius, I'll be having radius.circular, and for that I'll be adding 20.0, and also box shadow. So this box shadow requires a list of box shadows. So for that I'll be adding a simple box shadow with a color of colors.black with opacity that is going to be of 0.4, I guess. And other than this color, this will take a blur radius, and for that I'll be adding 5.0 and a spread radius of 1.0. So this will just add some radius and the shadow to the container. And also for this container, we want to have some width and height. So for that width and height, I'll just be creating two variables here that is going to be of width and height. And what I can do here is I can add 80% of width and height to this container. That means we can add a width into 0.80, and a height that will be height into 0.80. And this width and height is coming from these two variables here, which are taking the width and height of the screen using the media query property of context.size.width and the respective height. So if I run the app right now and I bring up the emulator, you can see that we have a simple shadow here and there's no color here. So the reason we don't have any color in this container is because we have not added one, and we only have the shadow here. And one other thing that we notice here is we need to have the container in the center of the screen. So for that, what I can do is I can add two properties to the column. That is going to be main axis alignment, and that is going to be main axis alignment dot center. and a cross-axis alignment that can be cross-axis alignment dot center. And if I run the app right now, so you can see that the container comes here in the center, and what we can also do is we can wrap this column with a center widget to center the whole column. So I run the app right now, and you can see that the container comes in the center of the application area. So other than this container here, we also want to add a second child to this column. Okay, so for the second child, what I'll be doing is I'll be adding another container. So this container will contain two buttons and one slider. That is this one, 2 buttons and 1 slider. So for that, we want to have a row so that we can have these elements horizontally aligned. So for that, what I'll be doing is I'll be adding a width to this container that is going to be same, that is width into 0.80, and a child. So this child will be of a row, and in this row we'll be adding the 3 elements, that is using the children property. Okay, so in this row what we need to add is we need to add a simple icon button and another icon button and a slider in between. So what we can do is we can create a simple icon button here, that is an icon button, and the first property requires an icon. That'll be an icon, and it requires an icons dot color lens, and the other property is for the on pressed, which I'll be keeping empty for now. And let me just copy this icon button and create another one. So for this second icon button, we need this icon here. So I guess this is the layers something. Yeah, layers clear, and we can have this second button. Okay, so other than these 2 icon buttons, we'll be adding another slider in between them, but we'll add that later on. So if I run the app right now, you can see that we have these 2 icons here, but we don't have any background like we have in our original application. So for that, what we need to do is we need to add some properties to the container. So in this container, what we need to add a decoration. So this will be of type box decoration again, and in this we can pass a color. So that'll be of colors.white and a border radius like we did above. And for the border radius, I'll be adding all radius.circular. That will be 20.0. And I think this will do the job. And if I run the app right now, you can see that we have the container with 2 buttons in it, and we don't have the slider right now because we'll be adding that later on once we have the paint area working. So the next thing that we can do is we can add some space between this paint area and this bottom layout by adding a simple sized box in between 2 containers. So this sized box will be having a simple height. Let me just keep it at 10. And by adding this sized box, you can add a simple empty space in between these 2 layouts. And if you want to add some more space, what you can do is increase the height of this sized box and run the app again, and this will update in the layout. Okay, let's come now to the core of the application. So what we need to do is we need to detect the user's touch on the screen. So basically we need to detect 3 events, that is when the user presses on the screen, when the user moves the finger on the screen, and when the user lifts up the finger. So for that, what we can do is we can add a simple gesture detector. So the place for adding the gesture detector is this container. So we can get the localized parameters for the user's click. So what we can do here is we can add a child property to this container, and in this child we'll be having a gesture detector. So gesture detector is another widget given to you by Flutter itself. So it helps us detect the user's gestures on the screen, like tap, long press, or many other gestures. The ones which we'll be interested in this tutorial will be on pan down, on pan update, and on pan end. So these will be the 3 gestures that we'll be interested in our application, and these will contain 3 functions. So on pan down will get the details of on pan down. On pan update will get the details of on pan update, and on pan end will get the details of on pan end. So these 3 events will help us detect when the user clicks on the screen, when the user moves the finger, and when the user picks up the finger and leaves the screen. So we need to use these 3 parameters of the gesture detector. Okay, so other than these 3 properties, we also need to add a child to the gesture detector on which it needs to detect the click events. So for the child, we'll be having a custom paint widget. So this custom paint widget is really a powerful widget given to you by Flutter SDK, and it helps you to draw anything on the canvas that it gives you. So we'll be adding the custom paint as the child of the gesture detector. What we want to do is we want to detect the user's click, and we need to draw the same thing in the custom painter. So what this custom painter requires is a painter property, which takes a custom painter. So for this custom painter, what we need to do is we need to create our own class that will be, let's just name this my custom painter, and this will extend the custom painter class itself. Not the custom paint, the custom painter. And we also need to add the override method here. Okay, so extending this custom painter gives our class 2 overrides, that is this paint and should repaint. So our most of the work will be in this paint function, and for now what I'll do is I'll just go up here in the painter and I'll just add my custom painter. So what we need to do is we need to implement this paint function here so that the user can paint on this screen. So if I run the app right now and I go to the emulator, what you can see is we have an exception here. So this says Boolean expression must not be null. So the reason for having this exception is that we have this should repaint function and it should return a Boolean, but we're returning a null here. So what we can do is we can change this null to true, and if I run the app again, you can see that their exception is gone and we have a simple container here. So the reason for having nothing in the container, although we have added this gesture detector and a custom paint, is because we don't have anything to paint on. So basically this custom paint does not contain anything, and what we need to do is we need to add a background to this custom paint so that we can draw on that background, and we want that background to be of the white color. So basically what we need to do is we need to come down to this my custom painter class, and in this you can see we have a paint function which gives you a canvas and the size. So a canvas is basically the area on which we need to paint, and the size is the size of the area. So basically what we can do here is we can create a paint object. So this paint is basically something like a brush, and you can add color, stroke, and all these property to this paint object. So what I'll do is I'll just name this paint object as background, and I'll just initiate it with a new paint object and give it a few properties like color that will be equal to colors.white, because we want the background of the canvas to be white in color. So other than this paint object, what we need to do is we need to create a rect, which will be a rectangle area in which we want to paint this white color. So what we'll do is I'll just name this rect, and I'll just use the constructor of this rect class that is from LTWH, that means left, top, width, and height. So using this function here, what we need to do is we need to give it a left of 0, a top of 0, and a width of size.width, and a height of size.height. And this concludes the area on which we want to paint the white color. So what we can do right now is we can use the canvas, and we can use its function of DrawRect. So basically this function takes a rect and a paint object. So this function will paint this color on this rectangle area. So for this paint, I'll just add a background color, and I'll just add a semicolon, and for the rect, I just rename this to rect and add this to the canvas. And if I run the app right now, what we can see is we can see that there is a white background in the canvas. And the other thing that we need to do is we need to round the corners of this canvas. So basically we need to round the corners of this custom paint. So for that, what we can do is we can wrap this custom paint with a clip or rect. So, and in this clip or rect, we can add a border radius. So I have mistyped this to clip rect. We need to add a clip or rect. So we can add a border radius here. And in this border radius, we need to add a radius.circular of 20.0. And if I run the app right now, And you can see that the corners of this custom paint are rounded off by the radius of 20.0. So basically we have the layout ready. We only have that slider missing, but we'll add that at the end. So basically we have this canvas and a simple layout in which we have the buttons and the upcoming slider. So coming to the next big thing is we need to detect the user's gestures on the screen, and we need to paint something on this canvas. So let's start with that. Okay, so the very first thing that we need to check is how to draw anything on this canvas. So basically this canvas gives you a lot of functions to draw things on the canvas. So this DrawRect we have already used. This draw points and draw lines function we're going to be using in our application. So what this draw line function takes is an offset of 0.1 and an offset of 0.2, and in between that points it draws a line using the paint object. So other than that, we have this draw points function, which we'll also use in our application to draw points on the screen. It also takes a list of offsets. So the first thing that we need to do is we need to get these offsets. And for that, what we need to do is we need to detect the gesture of the user on the screen. So let's take a look at that now. So for detecting the gesture, what we need to do is we need to come up to this gesture detector, and we need to use these three functions, that is the on pan down, on pan update, and on pan end, that are respective to the user tapping on the screen, the user moving the finger on the screen, and the user lifting the finger up from the screen. So these three functions will help us in getting the location, that is the offset on which the user points the finger on the screen. And what we also need to do is we need to collect those offsets in a list of offsets. So for that, let me just go up on the state here, and let's just create a new list that is of the offset, and just name this points. And let's just keep it empty for the starting. And what we need to do right now is we need to come down to this on pan down, and we need to update the state. So what we can do is we can call this .setState. So what we need to do in this setState function is we need to add the offset to the points, and we can get the offset from this details right here. We can get the local position, and make sure you don't get the global position. We only need to get the local position, that is local to the widget on which we're drawing. So we need to copy the same, and we need to copy that to the on pan update, and in the on pan end we'll just add null in place of this local position here. So what we're doing here is we're getting the local position of user's finger on the screen according to that widget, that is the container here, and we're adding that to the points in the form of an offset. Okay, so we're doing the same thing in the on pan update, and we're adding null in the on pan end so that we can detect that the user has lifted up the finger from the screen. So we can pass these points to the My Custom Paint, and for that we can come down to this My Custom Paint and create a property here that is the offset, and let's just name this points also, points. And what we can do is we can create a constructor here that is My Custom Painter, and this takes a property of this dot points. And what this will do is we can come up here in the My Custom Paint and add the points property and pass it the points. So basically, whenever the user clicks on the screen, this gesture detector will take the points and add that to the points list, and then give that points list to the My Custom Painter. And what we need to do is we need to draw that point on the screen right now. So let me just come down to the paint function right here, and what we can do is we can use a simple for loop to loop through all the points. So let me just write a loop here. In this we can say x is equal to 0, and x is less than points dot length, and let me just keep it -1 to detect the last point, and we can add x plus plus. So the reason why I added this -1 here, we need to check if we need to draw a line or a point on the screen, because there can be a scenario in which user just clicks on the screen and we need to draw a point there, and when the user drags on the screen we need to draw a line there. So for that, what we need to do is we need to check whether the next point, we don't need to check the x0, we need to check if x plus 1 is not null. that means there is another point on the screen. So let me just write the code right now. What we can see is we can check if point x is not equal to null, that means the current point is not null, and points x plus 1 is also not equal to null. So in this case, what we need to do is we need to use canvas.drawLine, and we need to give it points x and points x plus 1. And for the paint object, what we can do is we can create a new paint object here, and we can just name this paint for now. Paint is equal to paint. Let me just name this paint, and we can add property to this paint like color. Let me just put the color to be color.black, and paint.stroke width, that is the width of the line. We can give this a width of, let's say, 2.0, and paint is anti-aliasing to make the line a bit sharper, and we can give this a property of true. And what we can also do is, okay, I'm just putting commas here, I need to put semicolons. So the other property that we can add is paint.strokeCap, that represents the end of the line, whether it should be sharp or it should be round. So we can add strokeCap.round. And we can use this same paint object here and just draw a semicolon here. So what we need to do is we also need to detect if the user just taps on the screen. In that case, we have to draw only the point. So for that, what we need to do is we need to put an else statement here, else if the points x is not equal to null, and the next point is null. That means the points x plus 1 is equal to null. That means there is no next point. So in this case, we only need to draw a point. So we can do canvas.drawPoints, and we need to pass a point mode that is going to be pointMode.points, and we only need to draw a single point, that is the x. So in this case, what we can do is we can pass a list of points that contains only one point, that is points bracket x. And we also pass the paint object here. So let me just put in the semicolon here, and if I just run the app right now, we can see what happens. Okay, so you can see that I can draw anything on the screen right now, and there is nothing outside the bounds of the canvas. So this is working really good. And make sure you only add local position here, because if you add global position, let me just replace this local position with a global position, and if I run the app right now and I draw anything on the screen, there is a nice offset here. You can see that the mouse is not at the position on which the canvas is drawing. So basically, the canvas is getting the global position for the whole screen in place of getting the local position that is local to this widget here. So we need to change this global position to local position, and hence we get the local position only. And if I run the app, you can see that we can draw anything on the screen. Okay, so the code that we've written right now is working pretty fine. We get the points from the gesture detector, and we add those points to the points list that is in the state of my home page. And we give those points to the My Custom Painter, which then draws those points on the screen using this paint object here, which is a color black. So this code right here is having a major drawback. That is, we can't really change the color of the brush while drawing on the screen. So to make you understand that drawback, we need to add functionality to these buttons down here. Okay, so for adding functionality to these two buttons down here, and also to add that slider, we need to create two properties, that is the color and the stroke width. So basically, I'll be adding those properties to the state of my home page. So I'll be adding this color and name it selected color, and let's just keep this empty, and also a simple double that will be of the stroke width, stroke OKE width. And we also need to initialize those two in the initState function that is given to you by this stateful widget. So in this init state, what we need to do is we need to give default values to this selected color. That is going to be colors.black, and the stroke width is going to be, let me just tell this to be 2.0. And for changing the color, we need to use this package here, that is the Flutter color picker that we just added to the pubspec.yaml also. So for that, I'll be just pasting a simple function here. So basically this select color function, what it does is it creates a show dialog that creates a dialog on the screen, and the picker that I'm using right now is the block picker. And in the default app that they have here in the color picker documentation is using this color picker. We don't want to use that. It's basically one of these. It's I think this one. And what I'm using right now is this select and color, which shows these round buttons with different colors in it. I think this is more elegant. So I'll be using this one here, and it's called block picker. So basically I'm going to be using this block picker to pick the color. So what we have to do is we have to provide a picked color, that is the selected color, and we have to implement that on color change function, which gives it a new color, and we need to set that to the selected color using the set state function. So this is quite a simple function, and you can just copy paste that into your code also. So what we can do right now is we can come down to this icon button, and we can implement the on pressed function. And in this we can show the select color dialog. Yeah, we can call this select color function. And if I run the app right now and go to the emulator and I click on this button, you can see that we have this simple dialog here which helps us to choose the color also. And right now we don't have any way to just check if the color really changed. We can change that by adding the color to this icon, and we can do is pass in the color property and pass in the selected color. And if I run the app right now and I go to the app and I open the dialog and select on the color, you can see that the color of this icon also changed. That means the select color function is working properly. And what we also need to do is we also need to add functionality to this button right here, which is used to clear the canvas. So the functionality of this function is going to be quite simple. What we need to do is we need to set the state, and we need to empty the list of points. That is just by doing points.clear. And by doing that, let me just run the app again. And let me just draw something on the screen and click on this button, and you can see that the canvas becomes empty. And also what we need to do now is we need to add a simple slider to change the stroke of the brush. So to implement the slider, what we need to do is we need to add expand to take up the remaining space in the row. And in the child of the expanded, what we need to add is a slider. So a slider takes two values, that is a simple value and onChanged function. We also need to add some other properties to the slider. So let me just add a minimum property that is going to be the minimum value of the slider, and also maximum property. So I'm going to keep this at 10.0. That's going to be much greater. I want to add 7.0, and we can add a simple active color that is going to be the color of the slider itself, that is going to change with the color of the brush. So we're going to give it a selected color, and we also need to give this value here that is going to be stroke width that we just created in the state of the my home page. And in the onChanged function, it's going to give us a new value, and we need to add that to the stroke width. That is, we can call this dot set state, and in the set state what we can do is we can give the stroke width this new value. So basically if I run the app right now, you can see that we have a simple slider right here, and when I click on this button and select the color of the slider also changes. And right now we don't have any way to implement this slider into the stroke width also, but we'll do that later on. So if I click on this button right here, the canvas becomes empty. So what we need to do right now is we need to pass this color and the stroke property to this my custom painter here. And let me just show you the wrong way first so that you don't end up doing that. So for that, what we can do is we can just add a simple property here that is going to be color, and just name this color, and we can add a double, that is the stroke width here, and we can just pass on these two properties to this custom painter. Also we can just pass in this dot color and this dot stroke width, and we can implement those properties by giving the value to the my custom painter, and we can pass in the color, that is the selected color, and also the stroke width, that is going to be the stroke width. So after adding these two properties, what we can do is we can come down here. So instead of this black, what we can do is, instead of this color of black, we can pass in the color, and instead of this stroke width, the default width, we can pass in the stroke width. And this is completely wrong way, and it will work, but it's not the efficient approach. And if I run the app right now, you can see I can draw on the screen, and if I change the stroke, you can see that the stroke of the drawing changes, and if I change the color also, the color of the complete painting changes, and we can't really do much about it. So what we need to do is we need to associate a paint object with each point that we draw on the screen. So basically what we need to do is we need to have this paint for each offset that we have on the screen. So for that, what we need to do is we need to create a new class. So for that, what I will do is I'll just come up here above this my home page, and in here I can just create a new class, that is the drawing area. So instead of having an offset here, we need to have a drawing area. So basically you can name this anything. I have just named this according to just my own thing. So basically this drawing area has an offset and a paint. So what happens is we have a separate paint object for each of the offset in the list. So whenever we change the color or change the stroke, we don't reset the points that we have previously drawn on the screen. So for that, what we can do is we can change this offset to drawing area, and now what we need to do is we need to come back down here in the points section, and instead of passing the local position only, what we need to do is we need to pass in the instance of drawing area. So let me just pass in the instance, and you can see that it looks like this. So the drawing area requires a point that is going to be the same point that is details.localPosition, and in the paint area, that is the paint object, we can pass in a new paint that is having the stroke cap of round, the anti-aliasing to true like we have down here, and the stroke cap of selected color and the width accordingly. So we need to add the same thing, the same set state function to this pan update here, and we can just replace this set state with the new function here, and on the pan end we can keep the points to null because we want to detect if the user has picked up the pointer from the screen. So that's going to be same. So what we can do is we can remove the paint from here, and what we also need to do is we need to change this offset to drawing area, and here it will come us with an error. So what we can do is we can just put in point x dot points, and also here we can put in dot point because this is the offset now, and also here we can put in a point. So to resolve this paint issue, what we can do is we can come in the if statement right here. After checking that the point is actually not null, we can just write paint is equal to, we can get the drawing area, and we can get the area paint from there, and we can do the same thing in the else statement, and it will work. So if I run the app right now and I go to the emulator and I draw on the screen, and if I go to the color and change the color right here, I can draw with a different color, and if I change the stroke, I can draw with a different stroke right now. And if I make the stroke full, you can see that the thickness of the brush changes. And if I can bring that down, and I can also paint with a different stroke right now and change the color again and paint with a different color. So basically, instead of using just simple offsets, we're using this special class that is called drawing area, and it takes an offset and a paint associated with that offset. So with that, you're not only storing the offset, but also a paint for each of the offset. So this will help you in creating individual points on the drawing area, and then you can just update the settings and just draw with those updated settings instead of just redrawing the whole of the canvas. Okay, so I hope you learned much in this tutorial, and if you do, please hit the like button and the subscribe button for more Flutter videos coming your way. And I thank you all for your amazing support on my channel. See you next time. Peace.